Hey you, this is Mike. I mean, who else? Just a quick message to say before this episode begins. Well, that message is, hey, thanks for listening. This episode is one I recorded months ago. In fact, just thought I'd put it out there for you. Probably should have put it out during those 3 weeks I didn't put out any podcasts, but that would have made sense, quite frankly. So hence why I didn't do it, because, well, Oh, and also I just want to say sorry for the audio quality in the last 1 to 2 episodes with Keith. Microphone difficulties all fixed up now, so you will hear about that on Monday when we talk about. Well, it's a two-parter. So and it's super exciting. It's a really, really good one. So I'm really excited to show it to you, and hope you're excited to listen to it. But yeah. So thank you so much for listening, and take it away, me from a couple of months ago. Hey you, and welcome everyone to the That Chapter podcast. My name is Mike, and today in this old one I have a story for you. Two, if you can believe that. Both. The subject of today is family. You take all the love you have for your parents, your siblings, children even, and squish it into a little ball, and then just drop kick it down the field, because that is what these buckos did. 110% pure savage. These are tales of violence, and we begin with Neil Entwistle. Oh, so these are stories I've talked about before on YouTube, and boy oh boy, did these stick with me. And Neil, wow. Grade A gobshite. And the second story regards the Champion family, which, I mean, come on. Change your fucking name. That's your first problem right there, because there are no winners in that story. These stories, they're incomparable, which is kind of funny because I'm telling them in the same episode and they revolve around the same team. Well, okay. What I mean is, these two guys are incomparable, unless you were talking about the contents of a septic tank. Then you will see a literal shitload of similarities. Anyways, here, that's enough faffing about. So let's give it a go. The town of Hopkinton is where we are popping off to first. In eastern Massachusetts. Hopkinton is like many of the small towns, we see again and again and maybe even again. If you were driving from Boston to Worcester, you would see signs for it like it's in that side of the state. About 17,000 people live there, and it is where every mid-April the Boston Marathon begins. Although another way to put it might be that people are fleeing the town in droves. More than anything though, the town is safe. Rarely, any murders, and the people probably wouldn't even know where to begin if there was one. So I guess, if you're gonna do something, do it there. Legally, that is a joke. Do not commit crimes in Hopkinton, or really anywhere, to be honest. But I mean, hey, come on, who am I to tell you what to do? It's a pretty town, standard New England affair, wicked. Which is funny, I mean, not half funny, because a guy from Old England moved there. In mid-January 2006, that is when the Entwistle family moved to a house on the northwest side of town. Their backyard was literally like the highway, edge of town, sort of stuff. The family was made up of Neil and Rachel, both 27 years old, and their 9-month-old daughter, Lillian. And there was a darkness on the edge of town. The lyrics to that Springsteen banger, by the way, very apt for this story. It was 10 days after that move that Rachel's parents, Joseph and Priscilla, and Rachel's friend Joanna, called the Hopkinton police, asking them to do a welfare check. They hadn't heard from them in some time, and were worried about this young family. See, Rachel was due to have them over that weekend for a housewarming, but, when people arrived to the home, the place was ominously quiet. The Entwistles had recently moved from the UK, from Worcestershire, and now were living right outside Worcester, and had been living with Rachel's parents for a time. Now Rachel and her family were Massachusetts natives, and then they eventually found their own place at 6 Cubs Path, Hopkinton. So things were weirdly quiet from the young family in their brand new shampoo home. And so it was on the 21st of January, 2006, that a police sergeant entered the home of the Entwistles, having a goo around, seeing what he could see. The house, it was dark, and as he wandered around, he found no one. Even though the front door, it was left unlocked. Weird. The TV was on. Classical music was playing in the baby's bedroom. They would use that to get her to sleep. But the Entwistles' car was gone. It was as if they had left in a rush, or a panic, leaving shit on. One of the few lights on in the house was the light in the master bedroom. So this sergeant, he popped the head into that room, and what he saw there was something that will stick in his mind for the rest of his life. A very messy bed. That wasn't a joke, by the way. We'll get into it. In the center of the bedroom was a large bed, and there was like a shitload of bedding. Blankets, sheets, all your sleep accoutrement was in a big bundle on top of the bed. But other than that, nothing seemed amiss. Maybe they were changing the sheets, they got a ring, and they booked it. Who knows? They will soon. So the officer, he left the house. Where are they? I don't know. No signs of foul play here, so nothing to follow up on. And it was left at that. However, with still no word from the young family of Tree, the next day, he popped back again to 6 Cubs Path. Maybe they were just away and they've come back now. And this time, as he wandered around the house, he noticed a foul odor that didn't seem to have, been there the day before. And he ventured once again into that master bedroom. This time, he took a longer look, and he saw a woman's watch on the floor. He then lifted one of the many duvets, and he saw a foot sticking out. He had missed this the first time round. Discovered in that bed were the bodies of 27-year-old Rachel and 9-month-old Lillian Entwistle, both deceased. At first, due to the way they were found, it was thought that they could have been victims of carbon monoxide poisoning. Honestly, the police didn't think there was any foul play. That they didn't think that was a story, Then, when in the medical examiner's office, it was revealed they had been shot. The gun that had been used to shoot them, the entry wounds were so small, the police didn't see them initially. Rachel had been shot in the head. Lillian in the torso. Baby Lillian had been shot in her mother's arms, the bullet passing through and grazing Rachel's chest. They had been murdered, and a frantic search was done throughout the house for the final family member, but Neil Entwistle was nowhere to be found. The Entwistle family, or rather this variation of it, began all the way back in 1999 at the University of York in northern England. Neil, he was born in Nottingham, and Rachel Souza was from Carver, Massachusetts, and they were both attending university. Neil was the son of a former miner turned storeman and school cook, and he was like a computer genius, so it was only expected that he would, at the University of York, study electronic engineering and business management. Rachel, she was there studying English literature as an overseas student doing her year abroad, and it was as part of the rowing club that love done blossomed. Rachel, she was only supposed to be in the UK for a year, as I said, doing her year abroad from the States. But when she graduated in late summer 2001, she immediately went back to York to be with Neil. They were just mad about each other. It was 2 years later that they married in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Not Plymouth, England, although it's very funny because pretty much everywhere in New England is named after the old one. From there, the pair settled in this nice flat in Worcestershire, UK. Neil, he started working at the defense company Kinetic, at their office in Malvern, designing yokes to blow the shit out of someone. Rachel, she began teaching English and drama at a school in Redditch. And this is in eastern England, not far from Birmingham and the Welsh border. Because if I know my audience, y'all demand geography lessons every time. It was 2 years after their marriage, in 2005, that Neil and Rachel Entwistle welcomed the birth of baby Lillian Rose Entwistle. And there were smiles all round. As time went by though, Rachel, she started to feel a little homesick. She missed America. She missed her family. She missed her parents, and her parents missed their granddaughter. It was in 2005, the same year that Lillian was born, that they decided to go USA all the way, upping sticks and crossing the ocean to Massachusetts. They moved in with her parents for a time, before, finally finding the beautiful, stately home at 6 Cubs Path. That was a home that cost $2,700 a month to go along with their $400 a month big BMW SUV. The house had 4 bedrooms, a jacuzzi, and it all had to be furnished. And that was something Neil, he had no problem with, which was odd when he was unemployed at the time. He hadn't found a new job since moving to the States, and although he was in the hunt for one and he was interviewing, he was more than capable of splashing out, only the best, spared no expense. He was YOLOing the shit out of that credit card. On the 21st of January, having only lived in that house for less than 2 weeks, that is when Rachel decided to have a get-together. Parents over, her friend Joanna over, show the house and show the kid. However, when the guests arrived, they found a darkened home, disconcertingly so, and they called the cops. It was the second sweep of the house that led to the grim discovery. Rachel and Lillian under the covers, both shot to death. But where was Neil? Well, there was no sign of him. And so a call to alert the Entwistle family in England may be appropriate. And so it was on Monday, January 23rd, 2006, the day after the bodies of Rachel and Lillian were discovered, a Massachusetts state trooper called the home of Neil's parents in Worksop, UK. And there, they would find Neil.
Hello?
Hello?
Hello.
Hi, is this Neil?
It is, yes.
Neil, this is, my name is Bob Manning. I'm a trooper with the Massachusetts State Police.
Hi.
How are you?
Well.
I'm calling you because we had some bad news from over here.
Yeah.
And, we have some bad news about your wife and your daughter.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
We responded to the house and that they're deceased.
Yeah.
Do you know that?
I did.
You did?
Yeah.
And they spoke to him. He had quite the reaction to the police alerting him to his dead wife and dead daughter. Quite the reaction, or rather lack of it.
Sorry to tell you about your wife and your daughter.
Thank you.
Okay. Can you talk to me a little bit and tell me how you do that?
My wife and daughter dead? Oh man. Bummer. It didn't take long for the police to find out where Neil was, or rather where he had been. He had flown from Boston's Logan Airport back home, and it was not long after that Neil's dad, Clifford, called and said, hey, Neil's here, I'm looking at him. When the police phoned him, beginning a 2-hour conversation, Neil said what had happened. In a very shit happens sort of way, that's what happened if you can believe that. Anyways, how about them Pats? He said that Friday morning, the 20th, so the day before the family were reported missing, he had popped out that morning to buy some computer shit. When he came back, he found Rachel and Lillian dead. It was, he said, a murder-suicide.
I walked in, I called out to them. There was no reply. I thought maybe they were, I couldn't hear the shower, but I thought maybe in the bathroom or something, so I just got a few things together downstairs, and that's when I found them.
Neil, he was so distraught at this. He went and he grabbed a knife to follow his wife and his daughter, but, knife might be kind of sore. Ooh, not too keen on that.
I knew that Joe has guns in the house. I thought maybe I could, finish, kind of get myself, that way.
But I know, Joe, Rachel's dad, he's got a gun. I'll do it that way. Probably should tell them too, actually, but nah, don't worry about it. However, when he got there to their house, Rachel's parents' house, they weren't home. So instead of following through with his whole him committing suicide to follow his wife and daughter bit he was going with, He went to the airport, and the only thing he could think of doing was being back home with his parents. See, he needed to be tucked in. And so, without telling the police, EMTs, Rachel's parents even, about the, quote, murder, suicide, unquote, he just left.
I know this is difficult, and I appreciate you talking.
No, the state that I'm in at the moment is just, I just couldn't get it clear in my head to do it. I mean, it's such a relief to be able to actually talk to people about this.
He kept the whole story of his wife killing their baby girl, then himself, and then him being so distraught, but he didn't call anyone or 911. Instead debated killing himself, but he said, nah, fuck that, and he fled the country. That was the dealio we got going on here. Okay.
I've not done the right thing in what I've done here.
You what?
I don't feel that I've done the right thing in what I've done here by not letting, by not being the one to call and say what had happened. I haven't even cried yet.
You haven't even cried?
No. Not properly.
No?
No.
But what would properly be? Because usually, my experience is not really a proper way in a situation like this. Things just happen.
Yeah. I mean, that is what it is. No, I shed a few tears, Martin.
I can tell you, I have a hard time understanding why you didn't call 911.
Yeah, I can see that.
No shit. Like, what a strange reaction. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that Neil had something to do with it, because I don't think I have to say that. So Neil was in Old England, while in the new one, the investigation was ratcheting up. The BMW, Neil's car, was found at Logan Airport, locked. The house at Cubs Path was now a crime scene, computer history searched, forensics, the whole 9 yards. And it didn't take long for the police to find some odd things about Neil. Proof, I would say. And this was following on from the odd things that had also been said about him by Rachel's parents. For one thing, they really didn't know what their son-in-law did. He had worked for a defense company, but that was back in the UK. Since then, for a living, computers, blah blah blah, was his explanation. You know that thing, the internet? Well, listen to this. I got some news for you. It's gonna be big. And that's how I make my money these days. In interneting. He also always had money, even when it seemed he didn't have a job. And his parents were not well-off people. So I guess his explanation was he was just a great little saver. Technically, I guess I gotta scratch what I just said. He did have a job. If you can count being a goddamn scam artist a job. Neil had been working a myriad of grifts since 2003. Hey there, like the usual kind of, hey there, sucker! You want to be a millionaire where you cannot fail? Listen up. Neil, on the side, and I guess now on the main, had been for years creating these real shitty scam websites. Literally one was called millionmaker.co.uk. And if you're stupid enough to fall for this, it says literally at the top under millionmaker.co.uk, available to all countries, registered UK for low tax reasons. This is what it says on the front page of Neil's scam website. You cannot fail. How would you like to be earning £6,000 a month within 6 months and be on your way to £1 million within 2 years? We are offering you, and only you, the opportunity to make this dream a reality by tapping into the multi-billion-dollar adult internet business. Very nice. With Million Maker, you can be sure your investment will pay off. And best of all, there's no waiting years for your return on investment. We will show you, step by step, how to successfully promote your adult internet business and generate at least £6,000 per month within the first 6 months. Just in case you need that little bit of extra help, we also provide you with 24/7 dedicated member support, who will try to respond to your needs in 1 hour. Forget all other internet and home-based business schemes. This is the only way you will ever make your fortune, and you can work at hours that suit you. We do most of the work, and you can realistically expect to contribute a mere 2 to 4 hours per week. This means you can keep your existing job while you get your internet business started. You have nothing to lose and a lifetime of financial security to gain. So to be a part of this, once in a lifetime opportunity, all you need to do is send them £50 as a setup fee and £20 per month. All of this is done via PayPal. So this, it kind of goes without saying, is a huge scam, of course, I know, but it's hard to believe with testimonials like these. The testimonials are very, very funny. It literally has like the shittest testimonials of all on the website. Here's one. Nothing to be skeptical about. We checked everything out. It is a great opportunity. We make about $150,000 a month promoting this to our clients. And that's from Dave, licensed private investigator in Ohio, USA. And if a private investigator is leaving testimonials like that, he knows what he's talking about. Another scam website he has was about a big penis manual, which was their flagship project. Yeah, S.O.R. Publications was another site of his, which offered free ebooks on such topics as business and consumer, mail order and home-based businesses, multi-level marketing and publishing, health, hobbies and household, crime, UFOs, and miscellaneous. Like, dang, he's kind of got all bases covered there. He would also scam the shit out of people on eBay selling non-existent things, which much easier to do back in the day, talking over 15 years ago. He was also 30 grand in debt. Out of his 18 credit cards, only one was not maxed out. He was also mad into online dating, swinging, escorts. He also had he had like this entirely separate secret life no one knew about. Certainly not Rachel. His profile picture was of him naked on like a sun lounger bed thing. Like he's completely naked, but his dick is pixelated. But it's giving you the idea his dick is rather huge because there's a lot of pixelation there. But if it is actually Neil or not remains unknown. Like squinting here, it kind of doesn't look much like him. And the face doesn't either. Whoop. It was discovered in his search history that on the 16th and 17th of January 2006, Neil had been looking up best way to kill someone and knife in neck kill and also quick suicide method. I fucking love when killers search history is like that because it's the stupidest shit ever. Like half the time they're there looking at BuzzFeed articles from 2010, like top 10 ways to add bacon to murder. Take the quiz to see what killer you are. Like real stupid shit. Like, who Googles this and then does it? Neil Entwistle. That's who. It was on the 9th of February 2006, a week after Rachel and Lillian were buried in a single coffin, that Neil was arrested by Scotland Yard at the Royal Oak Tube Station in London for the double homicide. He was extradited back to the United States a week later. He was pleading not guilty. It was in June 2008 that Neil Entwistle would stand trial for the murders of his wife and his daughter.
You're also going to learn, ladies and gentlemen, that on the 31st of January, 1st of February, the wake of Rachel and Lillian were held in funeral, and the defendant did not attend. He sent flowers. You will learn, ladies and gentlemen, that there was a conversation on February 7th, a phone message and a phone conversation between the defendant and the attorney representing the homeowners, where the defendant essentially says, I give up all interest in anything in that home at 6 Cubs Path. You will learn that the next day, the defendant met some friends over in the UK. Ben Pryor, Dash Monday, had dinner with them. And he told them somewhat the same story, at least initially, as he had told Joe Matarazzo, as he had told Trooper Manning. But it varies a little bit, in a significant way. He tells his friends over in the UK that he had gone to Carver to get a gun, but then came to his senses, that he found Priscilla, told Priscilla what had happened in his discovery of the bodies, gone back to the Carver home, and consoled each other. that he had spoken to the police and gave a statement to the police. He had a clipping from a local newspaper for escort and sexual services. And he had a notepad with notes on one side that talked about his claimed deep loss of love for Rachel and Lily, and on the other side about how he wants to sell his story to the highest bidder.
The prosecution, they were out to paint Neil as a broke sexual deviant who wanted his family gone. The murder weapon, that was believed to be a .22 revolver. Joe, Rachel's dad, his gun. That's the caliber of bullet they were killed with. And Neil's DNA was found on the trigger, as was Rachel's on the muzzle. They said that he was a get-rich-quick scammer, addicted to sex with random women, simple as. The day of the murders, Neil had withdrawn $800, tried to take out more before fleeing the country. And the fact that he didn't alert anyone to what had happened was... that's evidence in and of itself. Friends of Neil he met with back in the UK, they told the court that even on the day he was arrested, he had tried to dodge police. He had asked for their help if he could, lay low in their apartments. And he also buried himself, with his own words. The defense, though, they stayed with the murder-suicide scenario, that Rachel killed her child and then herself with her dad's gun, that perhaps she suffered from postpartum depression and was lonely back home in America, surrounded by friends and family. Yeah, right, okay. Now, the gun, though, it wasn't found at the scene. Shouldn't it have been? If Rachel did it herself, where's the gun then? Well, that's when Neil changed his story. Remember how he said, after he found them, he drove over to her parents' house and was gonna off himself with that gun, but they weren't home, so he couldn't get it? Well, now he was changing that story. And he said he found the gun beside his dead wife, and to protect her reputation, he did drive over there and left the gun back where it belonged, back in Rachel's family's, it was locked in the shed. And of course he did that because, can't have a suicide in the family. Then this loving and doting husband, he was so upset and he was so, confused, he went back to England and blah, blah, blah. The verdict was what you would expect it to be.
Case of the Commonwealth versus Neil Entwistle on indictment number 2006-387-001, charging the defendant with murder in the first degree. What say you foreperson? Is the defendant guilty or not guilty?
Guilty of murder in the first degree of Rachel Entwistle.
Neil's parents, now they disagreed with that verdict, and they continue to do so to this day.
I wish to make the following statement.
We know that our son Neil is innocent, and we are devastated to learn that the evidence points to Rachel murdering our grandchild.
Neil was sentenced to life in prison. Well, 2 lives in prison. No parole. For the murders of Rachel and Lillian. Since being in prison, a number of threats have been made on his life. None, none successful to date. And that was Neil Entwistle. He thought he could do whatever he wanted and just get away with it. He thought he was a human Saudi Arabia. It's an odd one, though. He did a piss-poor job of trying to pass the buck onto his wife. Did he really think they would buy the whole, he was so distraught he never thought to tell anyone and left the country shtick? The phone call, as well, it's he really just could not have given less of a shit on that call. The only time he showed emotion was when during the trial, crime scene videos were displayed. Though it's kind of a laugh, as if when you watch the video of this, it's like he's trying to hide his laughter with his hands. Probably, if he is crying, I don't think he's crying over their deaths, but over the death of any future he will ever have. And now, guys, we have story number 2, and we go from Yankee Land, or rather, Massachusetts, Yankee Suckland, to Kentucky. Here's the story of champions. Champions in the competition of who can be the worst possible. This is a good one. Not good at all, but you know what I mean. Because after Ryan Champion tried to hire a guy, he said, fine, I'll do it myself. But as usual, he sure as shit didn't want it to look that way. In the far southwestern chunk of Kentucky Fried Chicken lies a county, shockingly, named after a fella named Stephen Trigg. He fought in the Revolutionary War, so I mean, I hope they called him Trigger, because that'd be cool as shit. And he was shot dead by the British in 1782. He was also quartered by them. Ooh, yuck. They William Wallace him. But I'm sure he's probably not too upset by the whole thing now. He's probably rather chuffed, because he got a county named after him. So look at you. Trigg County. Totally worth it. And so, Trigg County, biggest town, Cadiz, or Cadiz, Cadiz nuts, is where we are today. About 15,000 people live there. And it was a dry county, no alcohol until 2009. You know, it's incredible that dry counties are still a thing today. Like, people give out about, taking guns away and freedom and all that, but beer is still banned in places. I mean, come on guys, fight the real war. It's amazing that there was no alcohol in the county, because it really seems like there's nothing to do there. Which I guess is where our plot comes in. Now, the county, it became wet in 2009 after a very narrow referendum. Funnily enough, though, the people who voted no to alcohol sales, they voted no because they said it would cause drunk driving accidents, so that's like why it was banned. When dry counties have a higher percentage of drunk driving accidents, because people still want alcohol. So they just drive to the next county over, get wasted, and then drive back, not always making it. Anyways, that's enough about that. Let's get to the meat and potatoes, right? The meat and potatoes being the murder of 4 people. The Champion family moved to the area in the 1950s, Lindsay Champion at the time being knee-high to a grasshopper, and they were a farming family, with young Lindsay becoming the old one, and having a family of his selves. He worked at the Farmers Credit Union offices in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, for about 38 years. Hopkinsville and Hopkinton. The similarities are boggling the mind. And during that time, he married Joy, his high school sweetheart, later becoming a high school teacher. Lindsay and Joy tried for many years to have children together. However, it wasn't meant to be. So, in 1978, they adopted baby Ryan when he was 3 months old. However, 5 years later, in 1983, they never stopped giving it a go. Who does? Hey, we can't have children, but we'll be damned if it's from lack of trying. They managed to have a child together. Joy would give birth to baby Emily. So, 2 children, Ryan and Emily, to parents Lindsay and Joy Champion. And so the family, they were a happy, quiet, church-going, God-fearing, nice country gang. Lindsay, he became director at the credit union. Joy, named Educator of the Year in 2008. Ryan and Emily, they had like a sibling rivalry from youth, right to the end. Ryan, he joined the military, where he remained for almost a decade before returning to Kentucky and moving to Oak Grove, about 30 minutes from downtown Cadiz, or Cadiz. And you probably realize by now, this was in a super rural area, mostly fields and farming. Emily went her own way, that way being college, Auburn University, and she became a vet. Horses being like her speciality, and she would work in Louisiana at a racetrack there. The Champions were like big into horses. And so all of this sorta takes us to October 2014, when there was trouble in Cadiz. Didn't start that way though. That autumnal October, as the leaves were falling and orange, red and brown were nature's palette, Emily was back home in tiny Cadiz. She was spending a couple of days back with the family before starting a new job. Emily partook in a marathon, the folks they went to a birthday party, and the next day the parents that morning went to Sunday service. Emily stayed at home, still resting her dogs after the run the day before. This was Sunday, the 26th of October, 2014, a few days before Halloween, but there certainly would be some horrors that day. The elder champions returned home then after church to cook up some grub with Emily. And it was a few minutes after 11 a.m. the neighbors heard gunshots coming from the Champion home. One neighbor in particular was the sister of Lindsay Champion, a woman named Lisa. She heard those shots too, and thinking them odd at that time of day. Unlikely it would be hunters. A few minutes later, she heard banging. Someone banging on her front door, yelling her name. It was Ryan Champion. Had he come over for a Sunday dinner and something happened? In his hand was a gun, and around his wrists, torn up duct tape. He got her to call 911.
What's your emergency? My nephew, Ryan Champion, just came to my door and his wrists have been tied with duct tape, and I haven't been able to find out what's wrong. He doesn't appear to be injured, but I don't know what's happened. Okay, ma'am, where would I be sending the ambulance? You right across the road. I'm going to go over there with him, okay?
Ryan told Lisa that they'd been getting ready for Sunday dinner, and then someone, a guy who had taken a fancy to Emily, had suddenly burst in and started blasting. Only Ryan survived. And so Lisa, not having any of this, ventured over to the Champion house and was greeted by a bullet hole in the front door. On the property were the bodies of Lindsay, Joy, and Emily, all dead, all shot to death. A mass shooting. The only surviving champion was Ryan.
Oh, please, my brother has been shot, and his wife, Joy. My nephew is here, and my niece has been shot.
Lindsay was found outside the house, just beside on the concrete drive. Joy, she was also outside. She'd been shot in the face and just lay there, slumped over. Emily was found inside, duct taped up. Mouth, hands, feet. She'd been shot twice in the head. Things then got very strange when a fourth body was found inside. They didn't know who he was, but he was no relation of the champions. Ryan said what happened was this. He had been chilling at the house on Old Dover Road, watching TV with his sister, spending time with her, as she was only back for a couple of days. While they were hanging out on the couch, they heard someone enter the home. They presumed it was their parents back from church. But it wasn't. It was a guy named Vito Reservato, a fella Ryan knew. Ryan said Vito walked in with a gun and with duct tape. Now, Ryan barely knew him. He'd only met him a couple of days prior. But apparently, this Vito guy was absolutely infatuated with Emily in, obviously, a very unhealthy way. Vito then taped them both up, and just when he was finished, the elder champions arrived back. Upon hearing the car, Vito rushed outside, and Ryan just heard gunshots. Then Vito came back in, and he shot Emily twice in the head, executing her. He then turned the gun on Ryan. A Ryan who said, "Not today." During this, Ryan had managed to finagle his way out of the duct tape, using his strength. And when Vito put the gun to his head, Ryan, he managed to wrestle it off him, and the shooter became the shootee, and Ryan, avenging his family, blew Vito's head off. But why? Why did Vito do this? And who was he, even? Vito Reservato was 22 years old. He was from Las Vegas, Nevada, but he'd been living in Hopkinsville for some time, living with his 1-year-old son. He was married, separated from his wife who lived in Bardstown, Kentucky. He didn't have any criminal history, is more to the point. He was a hard-working fella, you know. Him doing what Ryan said he did not make sense. But these things rarely do. The community rallied around Ryan. The champions, they were known in the community, Joy, a teacher, Lindsay, credit union director, and horsey folk knew Emily. Ryan, they didn't know so much, but he had been away for a fair bit, due to his time in the military. The investigators certainly wanted to get to know him, though. And they wanted to get his story, multiple times. After all, why would Vito kill Emily if he loved her? How could he even love her when she'd only been there a few days? How would he even know her? How did Vito know any of the champions? Well, apparently Ryan, who worked odd jobs in construction around the place, you're building a shed, you need some landscaping done, whatever. That was his business. He had recently hired Vito as help. About 3 days prior to the shooting, Ryan had driven Vito to the champion abode on Old Dover Road. They had to pick up some tools from the house. And that is when, Ryan said, Vito encountered Emily. Vito, he started saying some inappropriate things to the lady, so inappropriate that Ryan cut ties with Vito that same day, told him to take a hike. You're out of here, you can't say shit like that to my sister. Obviously, he came back with a vengeance. But well, as the investigation continued into young Vito, Ryan's story kind of began to leak like a sieve, to be honest.
Okay. Is that hat okay the way it is?
Yeah, that's fine. I can see that.
Okay. I guess, just so I have it spelled correctly, I obviously already have your name, but R-Y-A-N, no surprises on that?
That's correct.
Okay, and the last name?
Champion.
Same. Okay. I guess the first question in all this, I mean, this has been a horrific 24 hours. How are you personally holding up? You seem remarkably composed.
Well, I'm just I've got one of those mentalities to just soldier through something. Really, that's what's been carrying me through, is that things need to be done. Especially, some people aren't doing so well. And to be honest, I really don't know yet, really, how to feel about any of it. I was kind of at a crossroads of being glad to get out of there, but at the same time, it was horrible. And it never really set in, It never really set in until I'd say it took really a good hour to sink in. He was a new person to all of us. His relationship to us was only a couple of days old, but I don't think I can go into any more detail than that. But I was constantly trying to zone in on if I could do something. I was always looking for an opportunity, but it was so confusing. I'd love to tell you more about the scenario, but it was a very confusing scene, and it was my impression through a lot of it that something wasn't right. I could have done something, but it was always a risk. It was always a huge risk. It wasn't a simple solution. I read in one news report that my hands were bound, so I guess I can say that. My parents were unbelievably good people. Unbelievably good people.
The police went on to speak with Vito's roommates, and they learned just a teeny tiny little bit more about him. One thing was that he had in fact been let go from his previous job 3 weeks earlier, and he was struggling to pay the bills for him and his young son. And he also never gave off any weird vibes. He was a normal, happy, hard-working dude. They also told the police that the day of the shooting, before he left the place he shared with his friends, he was acting off. He told them, he'd be back in a couple of hours, he left his cell phone behind, and obviously he never returned. The next time he was found, he was dead in the Champion home. Then, after Vito's friends saw the interview Ryan did with the media,
his relationship to us was only a couple of days old, but I don't think I can go into any more detail than that.
They told the police no. Ryan's story is complete bullshit. They knew each other. Vito, this wasn't a couple of days, a new hire that didn't work out. They were friends. They said Ryan's name came up all the time in conversation. They had been friends for years. And they also told the police that, maybe a week before, Vito told his friends that somebody would pay him a certain amount of money, well, an extreme amount of money, to kill somebody. Ryan, he reenacted the scenario for the police. A scenario that was starting to seem kind of hilarious, straight out of an action movie at this point, but not a good one, like a fucking Steven Seagal action movie at this point. The microscope was now on Ryan. Holes in his story, how many bullets were fired? Or you said you were taped first, when in fact they could see clearly on the duct tape, the one that was around his wrists, that he had been taped second, because one of the pieces of duct tape had a scissors cut, and then the rest had been torn. So if the piece of duct tape with the scissors cut was on Emily, she must have been duct taped first, right? Duct tape technology. Try saying that 4 times fast. Ryan Champion was arrested for the 4 murders 2 days before his family's funeral.
I don't think that there really are words for it. I'm not ready at this time to deal with the immense amount of suffering and loss that this experience has forced on me. I can say that the officer's decision to arrest me on Friday caused me to miss out on a time with my family that I
really needed the house. I'll never get that back. I'll never have that time, ever.
At this stage, though, they had no idea why he did what he did, nor why Vito was murdered. It wasn't until someone who lived in Oak Grove, where Ryan lived, called the police, saying they had seen Ryan, Vito, and another woman eating together at a Waffle House, which immediately quashed another lie. Ryan and Vito knew each other longer than he had initially said to the police. But this woman, who was she? Well, she is, trying to describe her physically in the nicest way possible would be what you would call a character actor. And her name was Anne Plotkin. She was someone who had defended Ryan when the eyebrow raises began. And not only that, Vito had been romantically involved with her daughter, because Ryan was romantically involved with her herself. Phone records between Anne and Ryan revealed the plot. See, Anne, she'd been the middlewoman between Ryan and Vito. They would never message each other directly. Anne, she helped plan the murders. Ryan used her the entire time, though I think she loved him and he was simply using her. And Ryan planned to have Vito be the fall guy for the murders Ryan, ex-military, was to commit. See, Vito had never shot a gun before in his life. Ryan, quite a number of them. I think Vito was just offered money to kill somebody and he turned it down and then was lured over to the house for some other reason. He was broke and he needed work. Ryan probably told him, come over and, I got a job for you. But when he got over there, Ryan killed him, his parents, his sister, and then wrapped himself up in the hero blanket. Now, the murders would be financial to an extent, but not the whole extent. Ryan hated his family. He was jealous of his sister's success. He believed they favored her, and he wanted to inherit everything they had, which was not a whole lot, but enough to be comfortable for some time. 2 months before the trial began, a trial where Ryan would face the death penalty, he decided to plead guilty to the murders of his parents, his sister, and Vito. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. In May 2017, Anne Plotkin pled guilty herself, pleading guilty to 3 counts of complicity to murder, and was sentenced to 22 years in prison. She was up for parole on the 7th of May 2019, petitioning for an early medical release due to a terminal illness. Don't know what exactly. Her petition for parole, though, was denied, and Anne passed away the very next day. And so ends the story of the Champion murders. Turned out Ryan, adopted son, had been harboring hate his whole life. But from what Ira said, his parents never treated him poorly or any different to Emily, who was, albeit more successful, equally loved. And the fact that he brought Vito in to cover his tracks, just make himself look like a hero, was just plain weird. He pled guilty to doing it, but he never admitted to doing anything wrong, or really said why. The reasons that we can gather are just, ones that have been deduced. Much like Neil Entwistle, who still himself says that his wife killed herself, and then his daughter. And that he was, framed by the police for killing, Rachel and Lillian back in Massachusetts. Well, these are 2 stories of champions, one by name, but neither by nature. Thank you so much for listening to this old podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time being here with the mic. Did I just call myself the mic? Cut that out. It really, really means a lot to me, and thank you so much for the love and support this podcast has gotten. It means the world to me. I really cannot tell you how much I'm really appreciating it, how much I'm enjoying it. I hope you guys are listening, or I hope you guys listening are enjoying listening to it too. Please take care of each other and yourselves, because I love you. Thanks, guys. Mike out.